I was just outside, and there's this guy carrying this little brown toy poodle. And the little dog looks at me and just starts screaming, "Ah!" Not barking, screaming, "Ah!" And I look over this dog, and it's the most... I just start laughing. I can't contain myself. And the guy holding the dog, which is still screaming at me, "Ah!" looks over me like, "What are you laughing about, you strange foreign man?" "Ah!" continues the dog. I'm just laughing my head off all the way home. So that's where I'm coming from. So let's talk about Khabib and Justin Gaethje. They had a fight. The world saw it. It was pretty awesome. Khabib retired. Let's get into all of that. So now, technically, there's a lot of great stuff we could go over, but the part that stood out to me the most about that fight, after the fight, the crowd begins to cheer. Khabib puts up his hands, bows down in the center of the octagon, covers his face, expresses this amount of emotion, very uncharacteristic of what we generally would expect from one of the baddest men on the planet, especially considering his culture. Man, I have trained with a bunch of Sambo fighters from former Soviet republics, from Russia as well, from Ukraine, from Kazakhstan, from all these countries ending with Stan, except for Dagestan. That's like the one country that I still have yet to meet anybody from in person. But a lot of these dudes from these former Soviet cultures, man, and they are... What's the word I'm looking for? Expressing emotions is not at the top of their priority list. Crying in public is not something you would expect to see from one of these manly men. It just doesn't factor in to their character. And so when we see Khabib bowed down, and whether he is crying or praying, he is expressing emotion, and a lot of it, in front of the world, and he lays down his gloves in the center of the octagon, and it is a powerful moment. It's an extremely powerful moment, especially for men to learn from. Especially young men who are taught through example that being a man means commanding the respect of others instead of showing respect to others. Huge difference there. That being a man means enacting violence rather than showing mercy. That being a man is this outward performance rather than something inside of us, rather than our character and the strength thereof. And so we saw something really important, I think, in the octagon after that fight. Not a little monkey dance, not a celebration, but a expression of emotion, an expression of humility, an expression of humanity. And that was pretty awesome. And then Justin Gaethje comes over and expresses his condolences. He said something along the lines of, "I didn't have a chance to tell you before, but I want to express my condolences for the loss of your father." And we have this mutual respect between these two athletes, and everybody's happy about that. And it's this strange moment where this ritual combat, this violence in the cage, brings the world together in this very interesting way. And so we have this exchange of mutual respect, and it's this beautiful moment. Everybody feels good about it. And in stark contrast, it made me think about that fight between Khabib and Conor McGregor before the fight, with all of those tensions and all the taunts coming from Conor, and then all that pent-up frustration coming out from Khabib afterwards as he jumps over the cage, and the violence continues. And I think one of the things that we love about violence is the ability to turn it off. We like violence when we can control it, when we can turn it off. I think that's one of the reasons why sports entertainment like WWE is so popular, because we have this expression of violent action, but we understand there are not bad intentions behind it. These are athletes who respect each other, who work together, who at the end of the day, after the match, they're all going to shake hands and go home and not harbor ill will against each other. There will be peace on earth, goodwill toward men, if you will. We like the violence when we can turn it off. But when we can't turn it off, oh man, that's a different thing. Anyone who has lived in a war-torn region understands that. Anybody who lives in a violent neighborhood where there are gunshots going off at night and uncertain death around the corner at any given moment, they understand that. The violence that you can't turn off, but you wish you could. And so combat sports like the UFC, ritual combat, which is something not exclusive to humans. Many animals participate in ritual combat, where there is a controlled level of violence, with certain agreements, certain rules, if you will. And then at the end, when there is a declared winner, nobody has to die. We can turn the violence off. Lizards do this all the time, man. Lizards are really good at this. Monitor lizards especially. They get up, they do Greco-Roman wrestling. They don't bite, they don't try to kill each other. They try to knock the other lizard down, throw him, and pin him. Just like human wrestlers do. It's ritual combat, and they do that for a number of purposes, territorial rights, mating rights, etc. But at the end of the exposition, they turn off the violence, and nobody has to die. And there's something that even the most base animals can appreciate and understand about that. Technically in the fight, there were a lot of interesting things going on there. I talk a lot about programming your opponent as a coach. It's not just about being faster or stronger, or even in the right place at the right time, but programming your opponent to respond a certain way. And I noticed Khabib, with some of his kicks, was able to program Justin Gaethje to respond certain ways. And then he gets into mount, and it surprised me that he attempted a triangle, attempted an armbar, went back to the triangle. Because at first I thought, well, he's going to keep that position, and he is going to maul his opponent. He's going to do that wrestle punch thing that he's so well known for. He's going to squish, he's going to smash, and he's going to ground and pound. And instead, he used some highly technical grappling. Fundamentals, basics, done very well, to finish that fight and give his opponent a face-saving exit on top of it all. And that's really interesting to me, because Khabib, several times in that fight, in the first round and the second, was in position to do significant damage to his opponent, and he chose not to. And a lot of people are pointing at the referee, saying, oh, Justin was tapping and the referee's blind and he didn't see it. And I understand exactly where they're coming from. From my perspective, I saw the taps, and you're thinking, well, the referee's right there in front of them. How could he not see that? And I have worked as a referee, and after almost every single match that I have reffed, at least half of the people there were mad. You can't be a referee without displeasing at least half of the people. And some of you might be screaming at the screen right now saying, well, that's inexcusable. And the fact of the matter is, you don't know. You have a different perspective. An MMA fight has 3 judges, and they're all sitting at different angles. They all have a different perspective. And it's like that for a reason. First of all, even 2 people sitting at the same angle, having the same perspective, don't have the same perspective. They're seeing different things. And so you'll get different ideas about how that fight went down, but put them at 3 different angles and you'll have a much better idea about how that fight went down. But inside of the octagon, inside that cage, that ring, on that mat, there's one referee, only one. He has one perspective, and it is really easy to have a delay of a second or two before you jump in there. And you might be screaming, saying, "No, that was like 3 seconds." And we could count them out, but it's not the worst call I've ever seen, man. Not the worst call I've ever seen. Yes, it's strangulation, cutting off the blood supply to the brain. Hold on to that for about 3 to 6 seconds. You'll render most people unconscious. And if they're still not unconscious, hold on an extra second or two, and they will be. As nobody survives without blood to the brain. But let go, and they will come back. It's not the end of the world. It's not a death sentence. Man, if you don't believe that, here's a video of me getting choked out by a girl up on the screen right there. And moments later, I came to. I wouldn't recommend let people strangle you on the regular. It's not good for you. Somebody asked me about that. I got a few questions recently about that. Strangulation. Is it optimal to not tap out to a choke? This guy asked me. Because you might have that extra second or two to find your way out. Well, I see a lot of newer guys tap out to panic before they'll tap out to a choke. Had a new guy come into the gym 2 days ago, and we were doing some grappling. I explained the concept of tapping out to him. Like, if you're in trouble, if you feel like you are being threatened with violence you don't have an answer for, if you're being strangled, if an arm is bending in the wrong direction and threatening to break, tap out, tap big, make it obvious. And that means stop. If your opponent's tapping out, you let go. And he was like, okay, I got it. And so we're grappling. I get a takedown. I get into mount position. And immediately he taps out. Because he panicked. He didn't know what to do. I'm like, okay. Now that you understand what tapping out means, let's try to work your way out of the position first. And understand when you're really in danger and when you're just in a tight spot. And yeah, it took some time. Whereas if you take a much more experienced grappler, you can put them in a guillotine, choke, and if they can make a little bit of space, even if they're very uncomfortable, in a claustrophobic position in which many people would tap, they can work their way out because they know when they're safe and when they're not. So an experienced grappler will tap out when they need to, and they won't if they don't need to. And then there are people like, oh man, there are some great Brazilian fighters out there who refuse to tap to anything. To anything, man. Like when Minotauro Nogueira fought Frank Mir, and Frank Mir caught him in a shoulder lock and began to crank on that thing, and Nogueira would not tap out, and Frank kept going until, pop, the bone snapped. Royce Gracie versus Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes gets him in the Americana. Royce Gracie just gives him this cold, steely stare like, break it, break it. If it breaks, but I'm not tapping out. And his arm breaks. It's a matter of pride. I would not recommend go that far. Because the recovery, the rehabilitation it takes to recover from an injury like that is going to put you out of training for a long time. Just tap out, man. Just tap out. As far as chokes go, if you are in a mixed martial arts competition and there's a lot of money on the line and you trust the referee to stop that match, if you go out, then sure, yeah. If it's just a blood choke, why not? It's not the end of the world. Unless you have a predisposition for strokes, in which case it might be the end of the world. So, yeah. Getting choked out, it's not great for you. It's not as bad as being concussed, but it's not super healthy to regularly restrict blood flow to the brain. But back to that referee. A lot of people were mad. A lot of people making memes. Speaking of memes, there is this meme that keeps going around showing Khabib in a jiu-jitsu class. He's got the gi on. He's got a white belt. I think he's got one stripe on that white belt. I believe he was promoted past white belt. I think he's a blue belt now. Man, imagine going to a blue belt competition in jiu-jitsu and Khabib is your opponent and you're like, ah. One of these is not like the other, but this popular meme showing Khabib when he had a white belt, he's got the white belt on, and this wasn't that long ago. He's the champion of the world, UFC champion of the world, wearing a white belt with one stripe, and the meme says, this shows that all you need is a white belt to be UFC champion. And I don't like that. I don't like the way that is termed, because it is underselling Khabib and his achievements. He's not just a white belt. That is not his experience. We all know Khabib is an experienced grappler. He is an experienced sambo fighter. He is an experienced wrestler. He's a very high-level grappler, very high-level submission grappler. But he's also got a very high level of humility. And so he goes to a jiu-jitsu gym and he puts on the white belt, because he understands there are lessons to be learned from this experience. I don't hold a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This surprises a lot of people because they assume everybody who coaches or participates in the sport of MMA automatically holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, an importantly different sport. I hold a purple belt right now, and I train with several different black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And over the years, I've made it a habit to train with every experienced Jiu-Jitsu black belt that I could, whenever I could. And some of these guys, if it was a contest of mixed martial arts, I'd kick their butts. But it's not. That's not why I'm there. I'm there because they have information. They have knowledge. They have wisdom that I lack and that I need, and that will greatly improve my game. So I'm not there to flex my muscles and show, look, my punching's better than yours. My ability to sprawl and brawl is better than yours. I'm there to learn jiu-jitsu. And that is what is exemplified by that picture of Khabib wearing the white belt, or any other great champion of mixed martial arts wearing a white belt. John Jones, for example. There were similar memes of him going around back when he was wearing a white belt as UFC champion of the world. A lot of people said the same thing. Aha, look, all you need is a white belt. No, man. All you need is to do everything that no one else is willing to do. A lot of people ask me the question, Ramsey, how much does it cost to come train with you? And I could throw out a money figure, like this is the cost of the gym fees, but that's not the answer I give them. How much does it cost to train with you, Ramsey? Everything. Everything. Now, you can come and attend classes and it'll cost you, whatever the gym fees are, but if you want to train with me, if you want to train with the express purpose of I am here because I want to learn how to win fights, what does that cost you to win fights? Everything. Let's talk about Khabib's retirement. So that man bowed down in the middle of the octagon, expressed these massive amounts of emotion. The world saw it. Khabib's retirement, this outpouring of emotion, and there are a bunch of reasons why that could have happened. He's there fighting without his father present, as was always the case with his previous fights. He's announcing his retirement. That's a big deal. When you've committed your whole life, when you've given everything to the pursuit of that dream, and then you find yourself at the end of that journey, hanging up the gloves, or in Khabib's case, putting the gloves down in the center of the octagon, as this offering, I am done. It is over. It's a beautiful thing when a fighter is able to do that on his own terms. And that's very rare to see, especially in the UFC. because fighters keep getting drawn back in for another one, and then another one, and I imagine the powers that be are going to try their darndest to get Khabib to come back in there for one more. Some big super fight probably. Let's see if we can get GSP in here with Khabib. Let's see if we can get Conor back in for another one, etc., etc. Try to make his 29-0 record an even 30, because that sounds nice on paper. But it's a very, very rare thing when a fighter gets to hang up the gloves and retire on their own terms. Very few fighters find themselves in that position in life, because either A, they're forced into retirement with an injury, and I know how that goes, man. That was painful physically because of the injury, but painful, man, it hurt my heart when every time I would watch an MMA event, every time I would watch a kickboxing match, a boxing match, a wrestling match, any of that, afterward, it would hurt right in the heart. I would feel like, I feel my body just twitching the way I would move if I was in there. And I would think, I wasn't done yet. I wasn't even close to where I wanted to be. And then other fighters, they don't get to retire on their own terms because they just don't have the money to do it. And so they have to go back for another one and another one. You ever heard that term, ham and egger? It's an old-timey boxing term for a boxer who would fight just for enough money to buy a plate of ham and eggs, to buy food, basic food. And there were a lot of those guys back in the day. During the Great Depression, for example, a lot of boxers would fight just for a little bit of scratch, just to buy basic food. But when the folks in the fight community see one of our own get out the right way, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, man. The cage that we use in mixed martial arts, it's a weird arena. It's a weird arena for a lot of reasons. One is what it symbolizes. Generally, we think about a cage, you're locked in there, you're trapped. It's a prison. It's how society views a cage. It's where you keep a wild animal so it can't get out. You lock two fighters in a cage, they put a lock on it. It's symbolic, man. They will physically put a padlock on that cage and lock you in while you are fighting. But some fighters find a certain freedom while locked inside that cage that is not available anywhere else in the world. I think it was ESPN, they did a little short video on my friend Rad Martinez. Awesome guy, great fighter, great wrestler. Had the privilege of being able to train with him when I lived back in the U.S. a number of times, and just an outstanding individual. And he spent a great deal of his life looking after his injured father. And I think this little clip, it's called The Promise. And you should go watch it. Look it up, Rad Martinez, The Promise, MMA. Look up those key terms. You'll find it on the ESPN channel. It's a beautiful piece of work there. And Rad, he committed his life to taking care of his injured father. His father was in this horrible accident that just rendered him unable to walk and move and speak normally. And Rad, this amazing MMA fighter, just took care of his father until the day he died. And in this little video, there's this little talk about how when he's inside of the cage, there's a freedom there. A freedom from everything that holds him back in life. Because fighters, we put a lot on hold. We give up everything in pursuit of this one little thing, of this title, of this glory, of this money, of whatever we are pursuing when we do this prize fighting. For this little bit of freedom inside that cage. It's a paradox, man. But to watch Khabib get out of the cage, if you will, it's a beautiful moment when he did it on his own terms. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.